My name is Jasira Monroe, 32 years old from Houston, Texas. What if the people you loved most, your husband, your sister, watched your world burn and called it opportunity? I lost everything in a fire. But that was only the beginning. They thought I'd stay broken. They forgot I come from fire, and I know how to burn back. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story of betrayal, loss, and revenge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. This one? You won't see it coming. Let's get into it. I smelled the smoke before I saw the flames. I was just ending a double shift at Memorial Hermann Hospital when my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize flashing across the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. Is this Jasira Monroe? A deep voice asked. Yes. This is Captain Fields with the Houston Fire Department. We responded to a call at 1423 South Lake Drive earlier this evening. My heart sank. That was my house. My mother's house. There was a fire, he said. It spread fast. We recovered one body. The world tilted. The air in my lungs disappeared. My mother, Zora Monroe, had been weak lately. Cancer treatments had drained her. Some days, she couldn't even get out of bed. I'd begged her to let me hire someone to stay overnight, but she'd refused. She always refused. I'll be fine, baby, she said every single time, only this time. She wasn't. By the time I got to the house, there was nothing left but wet ash and yellow tape. The structure had caved in on itself, the skeleton of our lives charred and black. A crowd had gathered, but I barely noticed. I stood in the street, still wearing my scrubs, numb as the wind carried the acrid scent of everything I'd lost, her photos. Her letters. The quilt she made me for college. The necklace she wore on Sundays. Gone. Gone. I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers and dialed Darian. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I texted him. Darian, please. Call me. Mom is gone. The house burned down. An hour passed. Then another. The crowd dispersed. The firefighters packed up. A neighbor wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Still, nothing from my husband. He was supposed to be in Dallas, interviewing for a new project manager role. He'd left the day before, promising to be back tomorrow, so I called again. He answered this time. Jazz? His voice was low, cautious. She's gone, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. The house is gone. Everything's gone. I don't know what to do. There was silence on the other end. Long, hollow silence. I'm sorry, he finally said. That's it, I need you, I whispered. Please come home. He sighed, actually sighed. Jasira. I can't help you right now. My chest caved in. What do you mean you can't help? I asked. You're my husband. Another long pause. Then he said the words that fractured everything. I think we need space. I'm staying here for a while. And then he hung up. I stared at my phone until the screen went black. Around me, the night was quiet except for the hissing remains of the fire. That was the moment I knew. I hadn't just lost my mother. I'd lost everything, and I had no idea yet just how deep the betrayal would go. I gave Darian the benefit of the doubt, for about 12 hours. Maybe he was in shock. Maybe the call had scared him. Maybe he'd be on the next Greyhound out of Dallas and show up on my doorstep with an apology and a weak excuse. But by morning, his silence spoke louder than any words ever could. I called. No answer, I texted. No reply. I even left a voicemail. Please, Darian. I'm not okay. I just lost everything. I need you. By the end of the second day, I wasn't worried, I was furious. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. I was still wearing the same clothes from the night of the fire. The fire marshal confirmed the blaze had started in the kitchen, maybe the stove, maybe faulty wiring. But nothing suspicious. Just, tragedy, that's what they called it. Tragedy. I called Darian's sister, Tasha. She sounded surprised to hear from me. I thought y'all were traveling together? she said. I saw his Instagram, looked like Dallas, but there was a beach pic too. Kinda weird. My stomach dropped. Beach. I jumped onto his profile, only to find it locked. He'd changed his privacy settings. Then I tried logging into our joint bank account, just to check if he'd booked another hotel or returned home. The screen loaded. Slowly. My heart thudded in my chest. Available balance, $3.71. What? That couldn't be right. There had been almost $9,000 the last time I checked. A mix of my mother's life insurance money, Darian's last paycheck, and what we'd been saving for a down payment on a condo near the Galleria. Now it was gone. I checked the transaction history and saw it in black and white, 2 transfers to an external account. One for $6,500. Another for $2,200. Both made in the past 48 hours. Both authorized by Darian Monroe. My hand started shaking. I refreshed the screen. Closed the tab. Opened it again. Same thing. Same theft. I tried calling him one last time, and this time. The call didn't even ring. He'd blocked me. There was no other way to see it. My husband had stolen from me and disappeared. I stared at my reflection in the dark window of my temporary hotel room, barely recognizing the woman in the glass. Skin dull, eyes hollow. A widow. A daughterless daughter. A wife, without a husband. That's when the first real fear settled in. This wasn't just a man breaking under pressure. This was a man who had planned his exit. And if Darian planned this, then what else had he planned? Why now, just after my mother died, the fire had stolen my home. But Darian, he stole the ground beneath my feet, and I was going to find out why. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just dug. I pored over every paper trail Darian had left behind, emails, receipts, forgotten bills he'd carelessly shoved into drawers. If he thought disappearing would leave me paralyzed, he'd miscalculated. Grief sharpened into obsession. By the end of the week, I had set up a spreadsheet on my mom's old laptop, one column for bank transactions, another for timestamps, another for where the charges happened. That's when I noticed it. A series of small but frequent payments to an unfamiliar name, Celtec West Billing. At first, I thought it was his normal cell plan, until I cross-referenced it with the number I had for Darian. The billing address was different. Entirely different. I stared at the screen, breath catching. Darian had a second phone line. I paid for a background report. A burner. Untraceable, except to the address it had shipped to for activation. It wasn't Dallas. It was Pasadena, Texas, a half-hour outside of Houston. Not far, but far enough to hide. I felt sick. The next strange detail showed up in the credit card charges. 2 nights at a boutique hotel in Galveston. 1 room. Paid in full. The billing name wasn't his. It was hers, N. Monroe. I froze. That name hadn't passed through my lips in years. Nyla, my half-sister, same father, different mothers. The woman I hadn't seen since I was 17. She was always the favorite, showered in gifts from Grady Monroe, our sperm donor of a father, while my mother and I lived off hospital wages and Sunday coupons. Nyla had everything, luxury, status, his name on legal documents. I had silence. And now, apparently, she had my husband. I searched her on social media, fingers trembling. New profile. Perfect lighting. White teeth. Designer bags. Location tags all over Houston. In one post, she posed in front of a beach sunset, captioned with, "Healing looks good on me," posted the day after my mother's funeral. I stared at her smile, rage boiling beneath my skin. How long had they been playing me? Months? Years? Was this revenge for something I didn't know I'd done? I scrolled deeper and found a tagged photo from weeks before the fire, Nyla and Darian at a rooftop bar. Cozy. Close. Laughing like they owned the world. My stomach twisted. This wasn't an affair, this was an alliance. And for the first time since the fire, I didn't cry, I planned. If Darian and Nyla thought I was going to roll over and disappear quietly. They didn't know me at all. They took my mother. They took my home. They took my trust. Now I was going to take everything back. and I was going to start with the truth. People like to say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that blood can be bought, and spilled, for the right price. Nyla and I were born just 11 months apart. Technically Irish twins. But you wouldn't have known we were related if you'd seen us growing up. Her mother, Rochelle, was Grady Monroe's prized mistress, groomed and flaunted. My mom, Zora, was the quiet one. The nurse he met during a hospital stay, the one he never introduced at business dinners, when my mother found out she was pregnant. She assumed he'd do the right thing. Instead, he offered her a check and a warning: stay quiet. Don't ruin my life. She walked out and never looked back. Nyla, on the other hand, grew up behind gated fences in Sugarland. She went to private schools, drove imported cars by 17, and posted photos from Paris by 20. Me? I learned how to make dinner for two on food stamps while Mom worked back-to-back shifts to cover rent. We only met a handful of times, mostly at family court hearings or when Grady felt guilty enough to pretend he wanted to play father. Nyla barely looked at me. When she did, it was with the kind of pity that made you want to spit. "I'm sorry your mom's still poor," she said once, dead serious, wearing a pink cashmere sweater and a Cartier bracelet. I was 12. She was 13. That was the day I decided I didn't want anything to do with that side of the family. Now here she was. In my life again. Not by accident, not by fate, but by design. She didn't just steal my husband. She targeted him, the Galveston charges. The phone line. The timing of the fire. It wasn't random, they'd waited. Planned. My mom's cancer had already weakened her. She couldn't walk up the stairs without help. Darian and I knew the house wiring was old. We had talked about getting it redone. But the work never got scheduled. He kept forgetting. What if that was on purpose? The investigator I'd quietly hired was already chasing down invoices, permits, property surveys, anything tied to my grandfather's land near Brazoria County. I hadn't thought about it in years, but my mother once mentioned he'd left her a plot of land in trust, something she never claimed because it wasn't worth fighting over. Turns out, it was worth fighting for, and now, someone had. I sat back in my motel room, staring at the old photograph I kept in my wallet, me and Mom on my graduation day. Her smile was tired, but proud. I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb. Nyla may have been Grady's golden girl, but I was Zora Monroe's daughter, and I wasn't going to let my mother's death be another quiet sacrifice. The report came in a nondescript manila envelope, hand-delivered to my temporary apartment by the private investigator I'd hired, Miles Calderon, a quiet, sharp-eyed man who didn't ask questions unless they mattered. He looked at me with a mix of caution and sympathy as he handed it over. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. I nodded, even though my chest felt like a vice was tightening around it. "I need to know." When he left, I sat on the edge of the couch, the envelope unopened in my lap. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me didn't want to look. Part of me already knew, but I peeled it open. The first document was a contractor's estimate, dated 3 months before the fire. It detailed severe electrical hazards in the kitchen and back hallway. Frayed wires. Overloaded circuits. A risk of spontaneous ignition if left unaddressed. It was addressed to Darian Monroe. I flipped to the next page. An email from the contractor's office, following up twice, then 3 times, with no response. The final message read, "Mr. Monroe, due to the severity of the damage, we strongly recommend you vacate the home until repairs can be made. Please confirm if you'd like to proceed." He never did. Then came the phone records, calls between Darian and Nyla, increasing in frequency the week before the fire. One of them was time-stamped 30 minutes before I got the call from the fire department. She called him at 9:04 p.m. The blaze was reported at 9:36. They weren't shocked. They weren't caught off guard, they were waiting. The last photo in the file made my breath catch. It was grainy. Zoomed in from a traffic cam. A dark SUV idling down the block from the house around 8:50 p.m. License plate partially visible. Registered to a rental company under the name Monroe. Nyla, she was there. They both were. I dropped the file onto the floor. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were dry. The tears had dried up days ago. What filled me now was fire of a different kind. They didn't strike the match. No one poured gasoline, but they had let the house burn. They had let her burn, because they knew I'd crumble. And when I did, I'd be too broken to notice the papers they had me sign. The trust transfer. The deed to my grandfather's land, 20 acres of undeveloped property on the edge of a booming commercial district, land that was now under Nyla's name. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about profit, and my mother's death was their down payment. I stared out the window, Houston's skyline glowing in the distance, glass and steel gleaming like nothing had ever gone wrong. But everything had. They thought they'd won. They thought I was done. They forgot that fire doesn't just destroy, it transforms. Grief makes you slow. Confused. Vulnerable, and Darian knew that. I remember the day clearly now, like someone turned the mental haze into sharp focus. It was 4 days after the fire. I was sitting on the edge of my hotel bed, wearing the same sweatshirt from that night. The coroner had just confirmed what I already knew. My mother was gone. That's when Darian called. For the first and only time since he'd vanished, he sounded gentle. Apologetic. Said he was still figuring things out but wanted to make things easier for me. He offered to handle the paperwork for the insurance and take care of anything left in your name. At the time, I was too devastated to fight. When the courier arrived with documents just to help process things faster, I signed them with barely a glance. He told me it was related to closing accounts and wrapping up my mom's affairs. I didn't even ask. Now I knew exactly what those papers were. The land, 20 acres just outside Brazoria County. Flat, boring, wild land. Nothing special, unless you were a developer. Unless you knew that the zoning board had quietly approved a commercial rezoning the month before. Unless you knew that my grandfather, who had owned that land since 1978, left it to my mother and only her. She never touched it. She didn't care about the Monroe name or its wealth. She said it was tainted soil. But she never transferred it either. She left it to me, as part of her will. Uncontested, unclaimed, and sitting in my name when she died, until I signed it away. The deed showed my name, Jasira Z. Monroe, in clean black ink. The signature line was dated 5 days after the fire. Transferred to a holding company registered to Nyla Monroe, and now, the county building website showed plans for a luxury mixed-use complex, high-rise condos, retail, parking garages. Value, estimated at $4.2 million. I felt the kind of rage that doesn't burn hot, it burns cold. Controlled. Focused. Darian hadn't just left me. Nyla hadn't just slept with my husband. They played chess with my grief and stole my future out from under me. They thought I'd stay broken. But here's the thing about being underestimated. People don't see you coming. I opened my laptop and emailed Miles, my PI, subject line, I want it all back. If they thought their game was over, they hadn't read the board right. They took my land, my mother, my peace. But they forgot the most dangerous thing in the world isn't someone with nothing to lose. It's someone who's found her reason to fight. I hadn't heard Nyla's voice in over a decade. But when she answered my call with a surprised, Jasira, all that time evaporated like smoke. Nyla, I said softly, carefully, I think we need to talk. I could hear her hesitate, just for a second. Then, I was hoping you'd call. That was her game. Always one step ahead, always ready to pivot. But I'd learned from the best. My mother taught me how to see through a smile, how to find the motive behind the words, so I played it cool. I don't want to fight, I said. I'm tired. I don't want the past to be the only thing tying us together. There was a beat of silence, then a breathy, fake laugh. Wow. That's really big of you. We agreed to meet the following evening at a rooftop bar in Midtown, some sleek, glass-paneled place she picked. I said yes without hesitation. That's how she'd feel in control. Comfortable, predictable, but I wasn't coming alone. Detective Reva Lantham, who had been quietly assigned to investigate the stolen inheritance and suspicious financial activity, met me an hour before. She handed me the wire, a discreet little mic clipped beneath my blouse, and reviewed the plan one last time. Keep her talking. Don't push. Let her brag, people like her always do, she said, and if she doesn't? I asked. Then we hit her with fraud and obstruction, Reva replied, eyes sharp. But if she slips even once, we have her. Just keep calm. I walked into that bar with my hands steady and my stomach flipping inside out. Nyla was already there, hair straightened to perfection, lips painted wine red, sipping something expensive like her conscience. Wow, she said, standing to hug me. You look amazing. Thanks, I said, letting her hug linger just a second too long. It's been a year. She laughed. Time flies when your life implodes. We ordered drinks. She talked. I listened, then I asked the question that cracked her composure. Did Darian ever tell you what he saw in me? She blinked. Slow. Honestly? He said you were smart. But soft. Always too loyal. Too emotional. I smiled, forcing it to reach my eyes. That's fair. She sipped her drink. I mean, he loved you. I think. But it's hard to build something new when you're still clinging to people who don't matter anymore. My mother. She meant my mother. I stirred my drink slowly. You really think the fire was just timing? She leaned in, voice low, smug. All I'll say is, opportunity doesn't knock, it burns. That was it. The words. The implication. I froze the smile on my face, forced a light laugh, and lifted my glass. To new beginnings, I said. She clinked it against mine. But mine wasn't filled with wine, it was filled with evidence. The clink of our glasses hadn't even stopped ringing before I felt the weight of what just happened. She had said it. Not in full, not in plain words, but enough for the wire to catch the malice underneath her smug little toast. Opportunity doesn't knock, it burns. The bar buzzed around us, oblivious. Waiters weaving between tables. Jazz humming through overhead speakers. A couple laughed loudly in the corner. And Nyla? She was glowing. Smiling like she'd already won, you know, she said, swirling her Cabernet with a casual flick of her diamond-studded wrist. I always thought you were too soft to survive this world. But I have to admit, I'm impressed you got out of bed, let alone called me. She leaned in conspiratorially. Darian thought you'd just spiral, sign the land over, and disappear. But here you are, dressed like vengeance. I raised an eyebrow. He said that? Nyla grinned. He's not as smooth as he thinks. But charming enough to keep you blind, I guess. Poor thing. She tipped her glass toward me like she was offering condolences. Inside, I was trembling. Not with fear, but with restraint. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every way they'd failed to erase me. But instead, I just sipped my water and gave her the same smile my mother gave doctors who called her strong after chemo. Empty. Cold. Knowing, anyway, she went on, it's just business, Jazz. You of all people should understand that. We didn't cause the fire. We just let nature take its course. And it opened a lot of doors. For you, I said softly, for all of us, she lied. By the time we stood to leave, she hugged me again. You're stronger than I thought, she whispered into my ear. But don't push too hard. You're not the only one with nothing left to lose. She pulled away with a wink. I left first. Walked slowly to my car. My palms were sweating. I turned the key, sat in the silence, and then reached under my blouse to pull off the wire. The moment I handed it to Detective Lantham that night, she said, that was enough. More than enough. By morning, the storm had started. A coordinated sting hit Nyla's holding company office and froze every account tied to her name. Fraud, coercion, and suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson-related negligence. Within hours, a second warrant was issued, for Darian. They found him hiding out in a rental unit near La Porte, caught mid-transfer of funds into an offshore shell company, and just like that, their empire began to collapse. one frozen asset at a time. I watched it unfold on the news that night. Local headlines scrolling across the screen. Monroe heiress under investigation. Land transfer fraud scheme busted. For the first time since the fire, I smiled without guilt. They thought they left me with ashes, but I'd planted a fuse. And now, it was their lives going up in flames. The sun was just beginning to rise over Brazoria County when I stepped onto the land my mother once called cursed soil, 20 acres of scrub brush, wild oak, and open sky. To most, it was worthless, just flat, untamed space on the edge of Houston's sprawl. But to me, it was the place they tried to steal. The place they thought I'd never stand on again. I looked down at the newly signed deed in my hand. My name, Jasira Z. Monroe, inked in bold black print. The county clerk had slid it across the desk that morning with a tight nod and a quiet, "You did good." I didn't reply. Just took the paper and walked out into the sunrise. Now, with the wind brushing through my curls and the scent of dewy grass rising around me, I felt something shift. Not like peace. Not exactly victory either. Something quieter. Like settling dust after a long storm. The land didn't feel cursed anymore, it felt earned. Darian had taken a plea deal. 3 years in state prison, plus full restitution of the funds he stole. Nyla was still facing trial. Her lawyers were scrambling, trying to pin everything on Darian, trying to convince the court she was just another pawn. But the recording spoke louder than any defense. I hadn't shown up to court for either of them. I didn't need to, they were already ghosts. What mattered now was what came after. I unfolded a small note I'd carried in my wallet since the fire. It was written in my mother's handwriting, barely legible, with fading ink and curled edges. She'd left it tucked in the back of one of her recipe books. "You come from fire, baby. Not to burn, but to light your own way." She must have written it years ago, long before cancer, long before Darian, before betrayal had a name. I pressed the paper to my chest. "I see you, Mama," I whispered. In the distance, a hawk circled overhead. The air was cool, but not cold. My breath didn't shake when I inhaled. I wasn't the same woman who'd stood outside a burned-down house in borrowed clothes. I wasn't the same wife who cried into the phone as her husband disappeared. I wasn't even the same daughter who once believed that loyalty meant silence. I was something else now, a woman who stood alone, but not empty. A woman who had seen betrayal in its purest form. And answered it with truth, a woman who walked through fire, and didn't come out clean, but came out alive, and for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough. Thanks for listening to Jasira's story. If you felt every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of her revenge, don't forget to hit that like button, comment below. What would you have done in Jasira's shoes? Subscribe for more gripping true-style stories of betrayal, survival, and justice, posted every week. Share this story with someone who loves a good revenge arc. You never know who needs to hear it. This isn't just a story, it's a reminder. Sometimes the fire doesn't break you. It reveals who you really are.